Welcome to Bookends of Recovery, where recovery gets real and loved ones aren't left out. I'm Laura, story sharer, tool giver, and your unofficial cheerleader with a messy past and a hopeful heart. Can you believe that we still live in a world where men are told, either directly or through subtle cues, that they need to man up, suck it up, or never let them see you cry? Well, I mean, unless they're watching one of those guy cry movies like Marley and Me or Field of Dreams. But here's the truth: mental health doesn't care what gender you are. Depression, anxiety, trauma, burnout, they don't check for masculinity before they just come crashing into your life. So, in honor of World Mental Health Awareness, let's take a moment and shine a light on something that we should be talking about all year round, and that is men and mental health. How many times now, and I know it's a joke about the husband will ask the wife or the boyfriend will ask the girlfriend, "What's wrong?" "Nothing, I'm fine." Men do that as well, and especially those in recovery or raised in homes where emotions were off limits. Mental health gets shoved in a drawer labeled "deal with it later," but that later never comes. So, what crops up instead? Irritability, shutting down, overworking, drinking, drugs, uh, risk taking, emotional distance. And that's not because men don't feel, it's because many were taught that feeling is a weakness, or worse, they were never taught how to process and feel emotions at all. And my husband is a prime example of someone who was raised just like that. In fact, he was told children are to be seen and not heard. And how often have you heard that saying? We need to remember that emotion is not weakness. Emotion is information. And here's the kicker: avoiding emotions, it doesn't make them go away. They're going to sneak out in other ways, whether that's snapping over a minor inconvenience. I love to use the traffic example, right? Or ghosting a friend, or having a lifelong grudge against someone because they didn't say good morning to you. You've felt this huge disrespect. But why does this hit even harder in recovery? Right? Like, so many men in recovery were only taught one emotion. Can anyone guess what that is? Ding, 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 anger. Right? Because it's the easiest emotion to access. It's right there at the top. Everything else, sadness, fear, grief, shame, it gets buried so deep that sometimes they don't even know how to name them anymore. Remember when we talked about the anger iceberg and how, anger gets right there at the top and the rest of the emotions, like the iceberg, are floating down beneath. So when those feelings come bubbling up in sobriety, it's like that flood with no life raft. And that's where emotional sobriety and mental health tools come in. Emotional sobriety is having those feelings without the fallout of the emotions. We're not white knuckling our way through recovery anymore. We're learning to actually feel our feelings, the good, the bad, the it's about, regulating emotions without numbing out anymore. That's how I handled my emotions, was just by simply pretending they didn't exist, or I just numbed them. And emotional sobriety is about handling stress and conflict or even disappointment without having it completely ruin your day or having a meltdown. You learn how to stay calm, you become confident, you're present. Even when life throws chaos your way, you're like, picture someone at the beach and they have an inner tube on, and as the waves are coming in, they stay afloat and they kind of just stay on top of that wave, just ride in that wave. And the waves keep coming and they're just bobbing up and down, but they're okay. To put it simply, physical sobriety is putting out the fire, and emotionally sobriety is not going back to play in the ashes. And so addiction may have been our coping tool. Recovery and healing requires that we have new ones. And of course, I'm a fan of having a very well stocked emotional toolkit. So let's take a look at what that can look like for men. Support doesn't mean that you're going to have this tearful, just breakdown therapy session, although those are amazing too. I've sat beside my husband where he's had that. Shh, don't tell him I told you. But it can look like just a regular walk with a friend where the real stuff gets said. Not just, not just the scratch the surface stuff, like, how about them Giants? Although we don't want to talk about that right now, they suck. But more like, I saw my dad over the weekend, and that really stirred some stuff up in me. Or saying something like, I'm struggling today. And you don't have to explain that, but you can share it. Finding a therapist who understands male trauma and doesn't brush it off. I will tell you that one of our first therapists, many of you listening will know that my husband is a pornography or addict, or struggled with it for a while. He's been sober now for over a decade, but one of the first counselors that we went to, his response when I brought it up, I said, he looks at a lot of porn. And the counselor was like, well, yeah, a lot of guys do. So he kind of just blew it off. And my husband was trying to explain, we just got married and I'm feeling overwhelmed. And he was trying to tell this counselor, I'm using this as a way to cope. The counselor was negating what my husband was telling him, because to him, he didn't understand that my husband was using it as a coping method. So it's important that you find a therapist that is listening to what you're saying, who understands that male trauma. And because trauma shows up in all different ways, And it doesn't necessarily mean that, for me, I was sexually abused as a child. I was physically and mentally abused. My husband was not, but his abuse was done in a neglectful way. So everyone is going to be different. And if your counselor doesn't understand that, then you need to find a different counselor. Everyone's trauma, everyone's PTSD is going to look different. Um, and it's okay to keep looking until you find the one who is a right fit for you. You guys know I went through several myself. And also, it's okay to sit with discomfort and uncomfortableness instead of shoving it down. I think our first instinct is always to kind of, you can't see me, but I always act like you can, but just, we always want to away from anything that's just like when I see a spider, I'm like, oh my God, get out of here. I'm not as bad as I used to be, but I was. But you just kind of cringe away from it. But sometimes when we sit with it for a little bit, we find that it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be. And another thing that's really helpful is creating boundaries. Those boundaries protect your emotional well being. And when we learn that the words "I'm angry," they're often a code for something else, like "I'm scared," or "I feel disrespected," or "I'm feeling helpless in this moment." That can really help. So the next time that you say in your inner dialogue, "I'm angry," take a moment to step back and ask yourself, am I angry, or did something just happen and I feel rejected or scared or judged? Ask yourself those questions. But again, take, if you haven't yet, I suggest either going on my website or just Googling the anger iceberg. It's a really good visual to kind of see what I'm talking about. And for those of you listening, the females or partners, I shouldn't judge like that, but anyone that's in a relationship with a male that's in recovery or one who is working on his mental health, it helps to know their silence doesn't always mean disinterest. My husband a lot of times will be quiet because he is in deep thought. I had to learn that. I had to learn patience. It wasn't always easy in the beginning. And irritability will show up sometimes as grief, embarrassment, shame. And so sometimes it can help to remember that. My husband can still be that way sometimes. A lot of times I'll see that he's tense about something, and if I just wait and kind of hear what he's going through throughout his day, then I can see, okay, this is what's happened to him. He's upset about it, and I need to let him sit with that for a few minutes, and then he'll talk it through with me, and then he'll be okay. And then remember, pushing, it won't always work, but because you can't push someone how to feel. But if you become a model of vulnerability, that might help. Because I tried to just be like, share with me, like, tell me what's going on, just do it, tell me, like, why won't you show it? But sometimes when we open up and be vulnerable ourselves, then you're showing your partner, I'm a safe space, you know, I believe you're a safe space. And they're like, okay, I can trust you and I'm going to open up to you. And, and you can, it's sometimes it's a simple wording. Instead of like, why won't you open up? You can just be like, you don't have to talk right now, but I am here for you when you're ready, or something like that. And ask someone, you know, how you can support him rather than assuming that you know what he needs, because we're not mind readers. I wish I was sometimes, but that's just not how the world works. And a lot of times, somebody might not want help, they just want a shoulder to lean on. Everyone processes emotions differently. I'm someone who wants to resolve everything right this very moment. I need everything done now. And my husband is someone who processes and thinks, and it could be days, before he's done processing a conversation. I'll think it's all done, and then he'll come back 2 or 3 days later and be like, "Yeah, so I thought about you were talking about." I'm like, "What?" Like, I thought we were done with that. But he's like, "No, you were right. I think that's a really good approach." I'm like, "Okay, great, thanks." And if you're a man listening, if you have ever felt like mental health wasn't for you, I totally get it. My husband used to shut down the second the topic came up. And here's the thing, you don't need perfect words, just start noticing. That's all. You don't need to spill your guts to every person, right? Because boundaries are healthy. But you do get to feel what you feel without apology. You're entitled to your emotions. You don't need a quote unquote reason to struggle. Mental health doesn't need permission to act up, it just needs your attention. So please don't keep burying your emotions just because you're a man and you've been told, suck it up, because that's not fair to you. And if you want, those of you who like to do writing, here's some bonus prompts for journaling, or just reflection or whatever. You might want to grab a pen and paper, or hit pause. I'm old, so I always say that. Forget you guys could probably just type it really fast with your phone. But what emotion is hardest for you to express, and why? What's something you wish more people understood about your mental health? And last, what's one small thing you could try this week to support your emotional well being? I really think it's time that we stopped pretending that mental health is gendered, because it's not. It's time we gave men a space to feel, to hurt, to heal, and grow, and do all of those things without shame. Because silence is not strength, connection is. And of course, you know what I'm going to say next, right? What's the opposite of addiction? You guessed it, connection. I thank you so much for spending time with me here at Bookends of Recovery. If something in today's episode resonated with you, share it with a fellow bookender or someone you think could use the support. And if you're looking for free worksheets or blog posts, you want to sign up for my newsletter or get some tools, please visit me at bookendsofrecovery.com or join the conversation on Facebook at Bookends of Addiction Recovery. I truly am grateful that you're here. Remember, healing isn't linear, but you're not doing it alone. Keep showing up, keep moving forward, and I will meet you back here next time. I am sending strength, connection, and positive vibes your way. This is Laura wishing you a beautiful day because you deserve it.